A wealthy man makes a bet to marry a black woman he considers beneath him. But what starts as a game driven by arrogance and racism quickly spirals out of his control as the woman he underestimated teaches him a lesson he never saw coming. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The rain was light, but the tension in the room was heavy, as Damian Scott, a self-made millionaire, sat in his penthouse, sipping his whiskey with a smirk. The glow of the city lights reflected off the glass, and the noise of traffic below seemed distant, a perfect backdrop for what he considered a harmless game. Damian's ego thrived on risks, business deals, and one-upmanship. He had built his empire on the backs of those who underestimated him, but tonight was different. "Let's make things interesting," Ryan, his longtime friend and fellow businessman, said with a mischievous grin. "I bet you wouldn't dare marry someone who's completely the opposite of your usual type." Damian raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. Ryan continued, "Not the models, not the society women you flaunt. I'm talking someone who you'd never even glance at, a woman who doesn't fit the mold, doesn't meet your standards." Damian chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "What's the prize?" he asked, always interested in what he could gain. "A cool $500,000, Ryan replied. 6 months of marriage, and you win." Damian's eyes flickered with curiosity. Money wasn't what intrigued him. It was the challenge. "All right," he said, tipping his glass toward Ryan. "I'm in. What's the catch?" Ryan's grin widened. "She's black, and she doesn't fit into your picture of perfection. But hey, I'm sure you can handle it. Or are you too afraid you won't win this one?" The casual mention of her race was deliberate, and Damian took the bait without hesitation. The racial undertones in Ryan's bet made it even more enticing for Damian, whose life had been dictated by control and dominance. He thrived in spaces where his influence, his wealth, and his whiteness gave him unchecked power. Now he would prove once again that he could win, even in this game. Within days, arrangements were made. The woman was chosen, Zara Thompson, a proud, independent black woman who didn't care for society's shallow judgments. She had her own life, her own ambitions, and she wasn't interested in being a pawn in anyone's game. When Damian met Zara for the first time, he was surprised, not by her appearance, though she was far from what his usual companions looked like, but by her aura, calm, confident, and self-assured. She was not intimidated by the luxury of the restaurant or by Damian's wealth. Zara's eyes didn't flinch at his attempts to charm her. She knew men like Damian, men who saw everything, including people, as commodities. "You must be Damian Scott," Zara said as she took her seat, her voice firm but calm. Damian extended his hand, and she shook it with a grip that matched her unwavering gaze. "I am. And you must be Zara," he replied, the usual smugness in his tone. Zara didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I know why we're here. And yes, I know about the bet," she said, her voice steady. "You're used to people playing by your rules, Damian. But let's be clear, I'm not one of those people." Damian was taken aback, though he didn't show it. He was used to controlling the conversation, controlling people. But Zara wasn't playing along. Instead, she had established her boundaries from the start, and her confidence intrigued him. "And yet, you're here," he replied, curious about her motivations. Zara paused, her eyes studying Damian. "Let's just say I've got my reasons. 6 months may seem like a short time, but if you think you can manipulate me or use this as some sort of joke, you're wrong." The way Zara spoke left Damian speechless for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "We'll see about that," he muttered under his breath. The first few weeks of the arrangement passed like a cold business transaction. Damian took Zara to fancy restaurants, introduced her to his circle, and showered her with gifts, all in the hope that she would bend, that she would start to fit into the mold he had for her. But Zara didn't budge. She wasn't impressed by the wealth, the glamour, or the lifestyle Damian thought would sweep her off her feet. "I don't need these things, Damian," Zara would say with a calmness that irritated him. "Your wealth doesn't define me." Damian, used to women who fell in line, started to feel the frustration creep in. This wasn't just about the bet anymore. It was personal. He needed to win, to prove that his control was absolute. Zara was supposed to be the pawn, the one who conformed to his rules. But she was turning the game around. The tension between them grew with each passing day. Damien began playing a more aggressive game. He limited Zara's independence, making it harder for her to maintain her usual routine. He made sure that her work commitments were disrupted, throwing obstacles in her way at every turn. But no matter what Damien tried, Zara stood her ground. She wasn't backing down. The more she resisted, the more Damien's desperation grew. He had never met someone like Zara, someone who wasn't afraid of him, his wealth, or his power. It was unsettling, and yet it stirred something in him that he hadn't felt before: respect. As the days passed, Damien found himself at a crossroads. This wasn't just a game anymore. Zara's presence in his life was challenging everything he thought he knew about control, power, and relationships. She was unlike anyone he had ever met: black, proud, and completely unaffected by his wealth or manipulation tactics. And that unnerved him. Their second meeting took place at a modest cafe, a place Zara had suggested. It was a far cry from the glamorous restaurants Damien was used to, but he agreed, intrigued by her insistence on normalcy. When he arrived, Zara was already seated, casually sipping her coffee with a calm smile on her face. "I thought you preferred five-star restaurants," Zara teased as Damien sat down. "Sometimes it's good to break the routine," he replied, trying to sound relaxed, though he was clearly out of his element. They exchanged pleasantries, but Zara quickly cut to the chase. "If we're really doing this for 6 months, there are some things you need to know," she said, placing her cup down. "I'm not interested in your money, your lifestyle, or your games. I'm here for my own reasons, and I intend to walk away exactly as I came, in control of my own life." Damien studied her, trying to gauge her intentions. She was serious, and it unnerved him. He was used to women being drawn to his wealth, to the luxuries he could provide, but Zara wasn't swayed by any of that. "So, what do you want?" Damien asked, genuinely curious. Zara didn't hesitate. "Freedom," she said simply. "You can have your bet, your games, but I'm not here to be controlled. I have my own life, and that's not going to change because of some temporary arrangement." Her words stung more than Damien wanted to admit. He was used to being the one in control, the one who dictated the terms. But Zara wasn't playing by his rules, and that intrigued him more than anything else. "Fine," Damien agreed, his tone sharp. 6 months, and then we go our separate ways." Zara nodded, her face calm, but there was a fire in her eyes that told Damien she wasn't someone to be taken lightly. She had accepted the terms of this so-called game, but she was playing by her own rules, and Damien was slowly realizing that he might not be the one in control after all. As their relationship continued, Damien found himself growing more and more obsessed with winning Zara over. Not just because of the bet, but because she represented something he had never encountered before. Someone who wasn't afraid to stand up to him, to challenge him. He showered her with gifts, hoping that the lavish lifestyle would eventually appeal to her. But Zara remained steadfast in her refusal to be swayed. "I don't need these things, Damien," she would say, her tone firm but calm. "I'm not like the women you're used to." Her words echoed in Damien's mind long after their meetings ended. He had never met someone who could resist the pull of his wealth, his influence. But Zara wasn't interested in his power, and that only made Damien more determined to break through her defenses. But Zara was not going to bend. She had her own reasons for agreeing to this marriage, and they had nothing to do with Damien's money or status. She had entered this arrangement with her eyes wide open, knowing full well that Damien was used to using his wealth and privilege to manipulate others. But she wasn't like the others. As time passed, Damien's frustration grew. He began to isolate Zara, cutting off her access to her usual routines. He made it difficult for her to maintain her work commitments, throwing roadblocks in her path whenever he could. He wanted her to see that without him, her life would be harder. But Zara wasn't the type to be easily intimidated. Every time Damien tried to exert control, she pushed back, and that only made Damien want to win her over more. This was no longer about the bet, it was personal. He needed to prove that he could win her, that he could break through her resistance. One night, after yet another attempt to assert his dominance over her, Damien found himself alone in the penthouse, staring out at the city skyline. The lights of New York, which usually gave him a sense of power, now felt empty. For the first time in his life, Damien felt like he wasn't in control. and that terrified him. He had always been the one in charge, the one who dictated the terms. But Zara had flipped the script. She wasn't afraid of him, his wealth, or his influence. She saw right through him, and that unsettled Damien in ways he didn't want to admit. Weeks turned into months, and the tension between Damien and Zara only grew stronger. Damien was used to getting his way, used to bending people to his will. But Zara was different. She wasn't playing by his rules, and Damien found himself losing control more and more with each passing day. One evening, Damien decided to make his biggest move yet. He arranged a grand event, an extravagant party at his penthouse, filled with influential people from his business circles. He wanted to show off Zara, to prove to himself and others that he had control over the situation, that this black woman he had married as part of a bet was now his, molded into his world. But when Zara arrived at the party, her demeanor told a different story. She wore a simple, elegant dress that didn't scream wealth or excess. She moved through the crowd with confidence, greeting people warmly, but her eyes held a firmness that reminded Damien that she was here on her own terms. As the night went on, Damien attempted to show Zara off to his friends, introducing her as if she were a prized possession. But each time, Zara would steer the conversation in a direction that made Damien uncomfortable, talking about her work in social justice, mentioning the struggles faced by marginalized communities, especially Black Americans. She wasn't interested in playing the role of the obedient wife. She was here to be herself, and she wasn't going to let Damien dictate who she should be. At one point, Damien's friend Ryan approached them, a sly smile on his face. "So, Damien, how's married life treating you? Is the bet paying off?" Ryan's words were dripping with arrogance, and Damien tried to brush it off with a chuckle. But Zara's face hardened, her eyes narrowing at the two men. "Bet?" she asked, her voice sharp. Damien felt his heart drop. He hadn't wanted Zara to hear about the bet, not yet anyway. But Ryan, oblivious to the tension, laughed. "Oh, come on, Damien. You haven't told her. It's just a little game we played, to see if you could handle being with someone different." Zara's expression turned cold. She looked at Damien, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and disappointment. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Damien standing there speechless. The rest of the party was a blur for Damien. He couldn't focus, couldn't enjoy himself. All he could think about was the look on Zara's face, the realization that she had been a part of a game, a cruel joke. He knew he had crossed a line, that things would never be the same. Later that night, when the party had ended and the guests had left, Damien found Zara sitting on the balcony, looking out at the city. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken words and unexpressed emotions. "Zara," Damien began, his voice uncertain. "I can explain." She turned to look at him, her eyes filled with anger and pain. "Explain what, Damien? That this was all just a joke to you? That I was just a bet you made with your friend?" Her words cut deep, and Damien struggled to find a response. He had always been able to talk his way out of difficult situations, to charm his way through life. But now, standing in front of Zara, he realized that his words meant nothing. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I didn't expect things to turn out this way." Zara shook her head, her eyes filled with disappointment. "You don't get it, Damien. You think this is about the bet, but it's not. It's about the way you see people, especially people like me. You thought you could control me, that you could win me over with your money and your power. But I'm not one of your trophies, Damien. I'm not here to be controlled." Damien felt a pang of guilt, something he wasn't used to feeling. He had always been in control, always been the one who dictated the terms. But now he realized that he had lost control, not just of the situation, but of himself. Zara stood up, her eyes never leaving Damien's. "You need to figure out who you are, Damien, because right now, you're just a man hiding behind his wealth, trying to prove something that doesn't matter." With that, she walked away, leaving Damien standing there alone. The weight of her words pressed down on him, and for the first time in his life, Damien felt truly lost. He had always been the one in control, the one who had the power, but now he realized that his power meant nothing. The days that followed were difficult for Damien. Zara distanced herself from him, spending more time away from the penthouse and focusing on her work. She continued her efforts in social justice, working with community organizations to support marginalized groups, and Damien found himself admiring her dedication. She was strong, resilient, and completely unapologetic about who she was. For the first time, Damien began to see Zara not as a challenge, not as a bet, but as a person, someone with her own dreams, her own struggles, and her own strength. And he realized that he had been wrong. He had been so focused on winning, on proving his dominance, that he had failed to see the value in the person standing right in front of him. Damien knew he had to change, not just for Zara, but for himself. He had to let go of the arrogance, the need to control, and learn to see people for who they truly were. It was a long road ahead, but for the first time, Damien felt like he was ready to take the first step. Damien found himself at a loss for what to do next. His usual tactics of charm and wealth were useless when it came to Zara. She wasn't someone who could be won over with material things, and she wasn't impressed by his power or influence. And for the first time in his life, Damien realized that if he wanted to keep Zara in his life, he needed to change. It started with small gestures. Damien knew he couldn't fix everything overnight, but he could start by showing Zara that he was willing to listen, to understand. He began paying attention to the little things, how she liked her coffee, the books she read, the causes she cared about. He knew it wasn't enough to win her over, but it was a step in the right direction. One afternoon, Zara returned to the penthouse to find Damien in the kitchen, attempting to make her favorite dish. He had seen her cook it before, and he wanted to try and make something that she would enjoy, something that showed he was paying attention. "What are you doing?" Zara asked, her voice filled with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Damien looked up, a sheepish smile on his face. "I thought I'd make dinner tonight. I know it's not much, but I wanted to try." Zara eyed him warily, but she could see the effort he was making. He wasn't trying to impress her with grand gestures or expensive gifts. He was trying to do something small, something meaningful. They sat down to eat, and the meal was far from perfect. Damien had overcooked the vegetables, and the seasoning was off. But Zara appreciated the effort, and for the first time in weeks, the tension between them seemed to ease. As they ate, they talked. Not about the bet, not about the mistakes Damien had made, but about Zara's work, her dreams, her hopes for the future. Damien listened, really listened, and he realized just how little he knew about the woman sitting across from him. "I admire what you're doing," Damien said, his voice sincere. "The work you're doing in the community, it's important, and I want to help if you'll let me." Zara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of surprise and skepticism. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you want to help now?" Damien hesitated, unsure of how to put his feelings into words. "Because I want to be better," he finally said. "I want to be someone you can respect. I know I've made mistakes, and I know I can't fix everything overnight, but I want to try. I want to support you, to be there for you, not just because of the bet, but because I care about you." Zara studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. She could see that Damien was trying, that he was making an effort to change, but she wasn't ready to let her guard down just yet. She had been hurt before, and she wasn't going to let herself be vulnerable until she was sure Damien was sincere. "We'll see," Zara finally said, her voice soft but firm. "Actions speak louder than words, Damien. If you want to prove yourself, you'll have to do more than just talk." Damien nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He knew that this wasn't going to be easy, that Zara wasn't going to forgive him overnight, but he was willing to do whatever it took to prove to her that he could change, that he could be the kind of person she could trust. The next few weeks were filled with small but meaningful changes. Damien began volunteering with Zara at the community center, helping with food drives and educational programs. He was out of his comfort zone, but he was determined to show Zara that he was serious about making a difference. The people at the community center were wary of Damien at first. They knew who he was, an arrogant, wealthy businessman who had never cared about anyone but himself. But as they watched him work alongside Zara, as they saw the effort he was putting in, they began to warm up to him. He wasn't just writing checks or making empty promises. He was there, rolling up his sleeves and doing the work. One day, while they were organizing supplies for a food drive, Zara looked over at Damien, watching as he carried boxes and chatted with the volunteers. She could see the sincerity in his actions, the genuine effort he was making to change. and for the first time she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Damien could change. Maybe he could be the kind of person she could trust, the kind of person she could care about. That night, as they returned to the penthouse, Damien turned to Zara, his expression serious. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for giving me a chance to be better. I know I don't deserve it, but I promise I won't let you down." Zara looked at him, her eyes softening. "Just keep doing the work, Damien," she said. "Keep showing me that you're willing to change. That's all I ask." Damien nodded, a sense of determination filling him. He knew he had a long way to go, but for the first time in his life, he felt like he was on the right path. As the days turned into weeks, Damien found himself adjusting to a new way of life, one that wasn't centered around wealth or power, but around genuine human connection. He continued working at the community center with Zara, helping out wherever he could, and slowly earning the trust of the people there. Zara, though still guarded, began to see the sincerity in Damien's actions. He wasn't just trying to win her over anymore. He was truly trying to become a better person. And while she wasn't ready to let go of her doubts just yet, she allowed herself to open up to him just a little. One Saturday afternoon, as they were packing food supplies, a little girl approached Zara, tugging at her sleeve. "Miss Zara, can I help?" the girl asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Zara smiled, kneeling down to the child's level. "Of course, sweetheart. Here, you can help me pack these cans into this box." Damien watched from a distance, admiring the way Zara interacted with the children at the center. She was patient, kind, and truly cared about the people she was helping. It was a side of her that Damien found himself drawn to, a side that made him realize just how special she was. As the day came to an end, Damien offered to drive Zara home. She hesitated for a moment before nodding, and they made their way back to the penthouse. The car ride was quiet, the only sound coming from the hum of the engine and the occasional car passing by. "You're good with them," Damien said, breaking the silence. "The kids, I mean, they really look up to you." Zara glanced over at him, her expression softening. "They're good kids. They just need someone to believe in them, to show them that they matter." Damien nodded, his heart swelling with admiration. "You're doing an amazing job, Zara. You're making a real difference." Zara didn't say anything, but the corners of her lips turned up ever so slightly, and for Damien, that small smile was enough. As they arrived at the penthouse, Damien parked the car and turned to Zara, his expression serious. "I know I've said this before, but thank you, Zara, for letting me be a part of this. It means a lot to me." Zara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the genuine gratitude he felt. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe Damien really could change. "Just keep doing the work, Damien," she said, her voice soft but firm. "That's all I ask." Damien nodded, his heart pounding. He knew he still had a long way to go, but he was willing to do whatever it took to prove to Zara that he was serious. In the following weeks, Damien continued his efforts, not just at the community center, but in every aspect of his life. He began making amends with people he had wronged in the past, reaching out to those whose lives he had impacted with his ruthless business decisions. He donated money to causes that mattered, but more importantly, he gave his time and effort. He knew that money could never make up for the harm he had caused, but he was determined to show that he was changing, that he was trying to be better. One day, while they were working at the community center, Zara noticed a change in Damien. He was no longer the arrogant, entitled man she had first met. He was kinder, more patient, and genuinely cared about the people around him. She could see the effort he was putting in, the way he listened to others, the way he treated everyone with respect. That evening, as they were cleaning up, Zara turned to Damien, her expression softening. "You've changed, Damien," she said, her voice filled with a mix of admiration and surprise. "You're not the same man you were when we first met." Damien looked at her, his heart swelling with emotion. "I'm trying, Zara. I really am, and it's because of you. You made me see things differently, made me realize that I needed to change." Zara smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I can see that, and I appreciate it. But remember, this isn't about me. It's about you becoming the person you want to be." Damien nodded, her words resonating deeply within him. He knew she was right. This journey wasn't just about winning Zara over. It was about becoming a better person, someone who was worthy of her respect, and maybe one day, her love. As they walked back to the car, Zara reached out, taking Damien's hand in hers. It was a small gesture, but for Damien, it meant everything. He knew that he still had a long way to go, but in that moment, he felt hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, he could become the man Zara deserved. The weeks continued to pass, and Zara found herself slowly letting her guard down. She had watched Damien transform, and while she was still cautious, she couldn't deny the changes she saw in him. He was no longer the arrogant, self-absorbed man who had made a bet at her expense. Instead, he was someone who seemed genuinely committed to change, someone who was trying to make amends for his past mistakes. One evening, after another long day at the community center, Damien and Zara decided to take a walk through the neighborhood. The streets were lively, with people out and about, enjoying the warm evening air. As they strolled, they talked about their day, their hopes, and their fears. "You know," Damien began, his voice soft, "I used to think that success was all that mattered, that having power and money meant I was important. But now I realize how empty that kind of life is. It doesn't mean anything if you don't have people to share it with, if you don't make a positive impact on the world." Zara looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "It's good that you've realized that, Damien. But remember, change isn't just about words, it's about actions." Damien nodded, her words a reminder of the journey he was on. "I know, and I want to show you that I'm serious. Not just for the bet, not just because I want to win, but because I want to be someone you can respect, someone you can trust." Zara paused, her eyes searching Damien's. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the determination to prove himself. And while she still had her doubts, she couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. A hope that, maybe, just maybe, Damien could be the man she wanted him to be. As they continued their walk, they came across a group of teenagers playing basketball at a small rundown court. The court was cracked, the hoops rusted, but the kids didn't seem to mind. They played with an energy and enthusiasm that brought a smile to Zara's face. "Hey, you want to join in?" One of the kids called out to Damien, a playful grin on his face. Damien looked at Zara, raising an eyebrow. "What do you think? Should I show them how it's done?" Zara laughed, shaking her head. "Go ahead, let's see what you've got." Damien joined the game, and to Zara's surprise, he wasn't half bad. He played with the kids, laughing and joking, his usually serious demeanor replaced with a lightheartedness that Zara hadn't seen before. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just having fun, connecting with the kids in a way that felt genuine. Zara watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions. This was the Damien she had hoped for, the man who could let go of his ego, who could be vulnerable and open. He was no longer trying to control everything, no longer trying to be the center of attention. He was just being himself, and for Zara, that was enough. After the game, Damien walked back over to Zara, his face flushed, a smile on his lips. "So what do you think? Do I have a future in basketball?" he asked, his voice playful. Zara laughed, shaking her head. "Don't quit your day job just yet, but you did all right." They continued their walk, the air between them lighter, the tension that had once defined their relationship slowly fading away. For the first time, Zara felt like they were on the same page, that they were partners, not adversaries. As they reached the penthouse, Damien turned to Zara, his expression serious. "Thank you, Zara, for giving me the chance to change. I know I still have a long way to go, but I promise you, I'm not going to stop trying." Zara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the genuine effort he was making, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe Damien really could be the man she wanted him to be. "Just keep doing the work, Damien," she said, her voice soft but firm. "That's all I ask." Damien nodded, his heart swelling with determination. He knew that this wasn't going to be easy, that he still had a lot to prove, but he was willing to do whatever it took to show Zara that he was serious, that he was committed to becoming the man she deserved. In the days that followed, Damien continued his efforts, not just for Zara, but for himself. He knew that the changes he was making weren't just about winning Zara's love. They were about becoming a better person, someone who could make a positive impact on the world. One evening, as they sat on the balcony, watching the sunset, Zara turned to Damien, her expression softening. "You know, I never thought we'd get to this point," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "When we first met, I thought you were just another arrogant rich guy who thought he could buy anything he wanted." Damien smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I was that guy. But you changed me, Zara. You made me see things differently, and I'm grateful for that." Zara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the genuine effort he was making, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could have a future together. I think I'm starting to trust you, Damien," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Damien's heart swelled with emotion, a sense of hope filling him. He knew that this was just the beginning, that they still had a long way to go. But for the first time, he felt like they were on the right path, that they were moving forward together. As the weeks went by, the bond between Damien and Zara grew stronger. They spent more time together, not just at the community center, but also at home, where they shared quiet moments on the balcony or watched movies late into the night. Damien had come to understand that it was the little things, the shared laughter, the casual conversations, the simple gestures, that truly mattered. One day, Zara suggested they visit her old neighborhood, a predominantly black community where she had grown up. It was a place filled with both cherished memories and painful experiences. Damien knew this was an important step for Zara, to let him into that part of her life, and he was determined to show her that he respected her world, her roots. They drove to the neighborhood, the streets bustling with children playing and people chatting on porches. Zara pointed out places that held significance to her, the corner store she used to visit, the park where she spent hours with her friends. Damien listened attentively, absorbing every detail. He could see the pride in Zara's eyes, the connection she had to her community, and it made him admire her even more. "Do you want to meet my mom?" Zara asked as they approached a small, well-kept house with a white picket fence. Her voice was hesitant, as if she wasn't sure how Damien would respond. Damien looked at her, his heart swelling with a mix of emotions. "Of course, I'd love to meet her," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. Zara smiled, a small but genuine smile that warmed Damien's heart. She led him up the steps and knocked on the door. Moments later, the door opened, revealing a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Mom, this is Damien," Zara said, her voice soft. "Damien, this is my mom, Judith." Judith eyed Damien with curiosity, her gaze assessing him. She had heard about Damien, the wealthy man who had married her daughter for a bet, and she was understandably wary. But she trusted Zara's judgment, and if Zara was willing to bring Damien into her world, then maybe he was worth giving a chance. "Nice to meet you, Damien," Judith said, extending her hand. Damien took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Richards. Zara has told me so much about you." Judith nodded, her eyes softening. "Well, come on in. I was just about to make some tea." They entered the house, and Damien immediately felt a sense of warmth and comfort. The walls were adorned with family photos. Zara as a child, her father, her mother, and moments of joy captured throughout the years. He could see the love that filled this home, the connection that Zara had with her family. As they sat in the living room, Judith served tea, and the conversation flowed easily. They talked about Zara's work, the community, and even Damien's efforts at the center. Judith listened carefully, her eyes never leaving Damien's. She could see the changes in him, the sincerity in his voice, the determination to be better. It was a side of him that she hadn't expected, and she found herself slowly warming to him. "You've come a long way, Damien," Judith said, her voice gentle. "I know it wasn't easy for you to step into our world, but I can see that you're trying, and that means a lot to me." Damien looked at her, his heart swelling with emotion. "Thank you, Mrs. Richards. I know I've made mistakes, and I know I don't deserve Zara's forgiveness, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove that I've changed. I want to be someone she can be proud of." Judith smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "Keep doing the work, Damien. Actions speak louder than words, and from what I've seen, you're on the right path." Zara watched the interaction between her mother and Damien, her heart filled with a mix of emotions. She had been hesitant to bring Damien into her world, to let him see the part of her life that mattered most. But seeing him sitting there, talking with her mother, she realized that maybe, just maybe, Damien truly was changing. As they left her mother's house later that evening, Zara turned to Damien, her eyes filled with emotion. "Thank you for coming today," she said, her voice soft. "It means a lot to me." Damien looked at her, his heart swelling with love. "Thank you for letting me be a part of it. Your family, your community, they're incredible. And I want to be a part of it, if you'll let me." Zara smiled, her eyes softening. "We'll see, Damien. Just keep doing the work." The days that followed were filled with moments that brought Damien and Zara closer together. They continued their work at the community center, but they also spent more time together outside of their volunteering. Damien began to understand the importance of Zara's community, the pride she took in her heritage, and the struggles she had faced as a Black woman in a world that often underestimated her. One evening, as they sat on the balcony, Zara turned to Damien, her expression thoughtful. "Do you know why I agreed to marry you?" she asked, her voice soft. Damien looked at her, his brow furrowed. "I always wondered," he admitted. "I know I was a jerk back then, and I couldn't understand why someone like you would agree to something like this." Zara nodded, her eyes distant. "I did it because I wanted to prove a point. I wanted to show you that you couldn't control everything, that you couldn't use your money to manipulate people. I wanted to make you see the value in people, not just their usefulness to you." Damien felt a pang of guilt, his heart heavy. "I know I was wrong, Zara. I know I made mistakes and I hurt you. But I promise you, I'm not that person anymore." Zara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. "I know. I can see that you're trying, and that's why I'm still here." Damien reached out, taking Zara's hand in his. "I love you, Zara. I know it might be too soon to say that, but it's the truth. You've changed me in ways I never thought possible, and I want to spend my life making it up to you, proving that I'm worthy of your love." Zara looked at him, her eyes softening. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the genuine love he felt for her, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could have a future together. "I love you too, Damien," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But it's going to take time. I need to know that this is real, that you're not just saying what you think I want to hear." Damien nodded, his heart swelling with determination. "I understand, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. No more games, no more bets. Just us." Zara smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Just us," she repeated, her voice filled with hope. As their relationship began to blossom, Damien found himself spending more and more time with Zara, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He admired her strength, her determination, and the way she carried herself in the face of the world's challenges. She was proud of who she was, proud of her identity as a Black woman, and Damien found himself learning from her every day. One afternoon, Damien suggested they visit a new restaurant in town. Zara agreed, and they dressed up for the occasion. Damien wanted this to be a special evening, something different from their usual routines. He had made a reservation at a high-end restaurant that was known for its exquisite cuisine and atmosphere. When they arrived, the hostess greeted them warmly at first, but Damien couldn't help but notice the subtle change in her demeanor when she saw Zara. The smile on her face became strained, her eyes shifting uneasily as she glanced at Damien. "Do you have a reservation?" the hostess asked, her tone suddenly less welcoming. "Yes, Marshall, party of 2, Damien replied, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The hostess scanned the reservation list, her eyes darting between Damien and Zara. "I'm sorry, but it seems we're fully booked tonight," she said, her voice cold. Damien frowned, his eyes narrowing. "That's impossible. I made a reservation days ago. Are you sure?" The hostess hesitated, her gaze shifting to Zara before she forced a polite smile. "I'm sorry, sir. There must have been a mistake. We can't accommodate you tonight." Zara's expression remained calm, but Damien could see the hurt in her eyes. He knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't about a mistake. This was about Zara, about the color of her skin and the way she didn't fit the image the restaurant wanted to project. "Listen," Damien said, his voice filled with barely contained anger. "We have a reservation, and we're not leaving until we're seated. I don't care what kind of mistake you think happened, but we're staying." The hostess looked flustered, clearly taken aback by Damien's firm stance. She glanced over at the manager, who had been watching the interaction from a distance. The manager approached, his expression one of forced politeness. "Is there a problem here?" the manager asked, his eyes flicking to Zara for a brief moment before settling on Damien. "There is," Damien said, his voice cold. "We have a reservation, and your hostess is telling us you're fully booked. I don't appreciate the way we're being treated." The manager hesitated, his gaze once again shifting to Zara. "I'm very sorry for the inconvenience, sir. Let me see what I can do." Within minutes, they were escorted to a table, but the mood had already been tainted by the interaction. Damien could feel the tension in the air, the way people glanced at them from across the room. He knew Zara felt it too, but she remained composed, her expression calm. As they sat down, Damien reached across the table, taking Zara's hand in his. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice filled with regret. "You shouldn't have to go through that. It's not fair." Zara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. She gave him a small, sad smile. "This is the reality for people like me, Damien. It's not new. It's something I've dealt with my whole life." Damien felt a pang of guilt, his heart heavy. He had never truly understood what Zara went through on a daily basis. The discrimination, the judgment, the way people treated her just because of the color of her skin. He realized just how privileged he had been, how blind he had been to the struggles that Zara and so many others faced. "I hate that this is something you have to deal with," Damien said, his voice filled with emotion. "I want to change things, Zara. I want to do something to make a difference." Zara looked at him, her eyes softening. "Change doesn't happen overnight, Damien. But it starts with people like you, people who are willing to stand up, to speak out, and to make a difference. You can't change the world by yourself, but you can be a part of the solution." Damien nodded, her words resonating deeply within him. He knew she was right. Change wasn't going to happen overnight, but he was determined to do whatever he could to make a difference, to be an ally, and to stand up against the injustice that Zara faced every day. The rest of the evening was quiet, the earlier incident casting a shadow over their time at the restaurant. But despite the discomfort, Damien and Zara found solace in each other's presence. They talked about their experiences, their hopes for the future, and the changes they wanted to see in the world. As they left the restaurant, Damien wrapped his arm around Zara, holding her close. He knew that their journey wasn't going to be easy, that there would be challenges and obstacles along the way. But he also knew that as long as they were together, they could face anything. Later that night, as they sat on the balcony, looking out at the city, Zara turned to Damien, her expression thoughtful. "Do you really think you can make a difference?" she asked, her voice soft. Damien looked at her, his heart swelling with determination. "I don't know, but I'm going to try. I'm going to do everything I can to make this world a better place. For you, for us, and for everyone who has been treated unfairly." Zara smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "That's all I need, Damien. Just keep trying." Damien nodded, his heart filled with love for the woman sitting beside him. He knew that their journey was just beginning, that there were still so many challenges ahead. But he was ready to fight, ready to stand up for what was right, and ready to prove that he could be the man Zara deserved. The next few weeks were filled with action. Damien used his influence to support organizations focused on racial equality, using his platform to bring attention to the injustices faced by marginalized communities. He knew that he couldn't change the world on his own, but he was determined to be a part of the movement for change. Zara watched his efforts with a mix of admiration and caution. She could see that Damien was trying, that he was using his privilege to make a difference. And while she was proud of him, she also knew that change took time, that it required commitment and perseverance. One evening, as they sat together at the community center, surrounded by the people they had grown close to, Zara turned to Damien, her eyes filled with emotion. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Damien looked at her, his heart swelling with love. "I'm just trying to be the man you deserve, Zara. I know I have a long way to go, but I'm not going to stop trying." Zara smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "And that's why I love you." Damien felt his heart soar, a sense of fulfillment washing over him. He knew that their journey was far from over, that there were still so many challenges ahead. But in that moment, he knew that they were on the right path, together, facing whatever the future held. As Damien and Zara's bond grew stronger, their lives began to intertwine more deeply. Damien's efforts to make a difference were genuine, and Zara could see that he was willing to put in the work to be a better person. She could see that he wasn't just trying to prove something to her. He was genuinely trying to make up for the mistakes of his past. One weekend, Zara invited Damien to a gathering in her neighborhood. It was a community event, a block party filled with music, food, and laughter. For Zara, this was her world, a place where she felt at home, surrounded by people who accepted her for who she was. Damien, dressed casually in jeans and a t-shirt, was initially nervous. He knew how important this event was to Zara, and he wanted to make a good impression. But as they walked through the crowd, greeting people and shaking hands, Damien began to relax. He could see how much this community meant to Zara, and he could feel the warmth and love that filled the air. "Zara," a voice called out, and Damien turned to see an older woman approaching them. She had a warm smile and a familiar face. Judith, Zara's mother. "Mom," Zara said, her face lighting up as she embraced her mother. "I'm so glad you're here." Judith smiled, her eyes shifting to Damien. "Damien, it's good to see you again." "Good to see you too, Mrs. Richards," Damien said, his voice filled with warmth. Judith nodded, her eyes studying Damien for a moment. "I've been hearing good things about you," she said, her voice kind but firm. "Zara tells me you've been working hard at the community center and that you've been doing your best to make things right." Damien felt a warmth spread through him at her words. He knew that earning Judith's approval was important to Zara, and he was glad to hear that he was making progress. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. "I'm doing my best. Zara means the world to me, and I just want to make her proud." Judith smiled, her eyes softening. "Keep it up, Damien. You're on the right path." The block party was filled with joy, children running around, families gathered together, and music playing from a local band. Damien found himself immersed in the atmosphere, laughing and dancing with Zara, meeting new people, and sharing stories. It was a side of life he had never experienced before, simple, honest, and full of love. At one point, Zara introduced Damien to an old friend of hers, Marcus, a kind and gentle man who had known Zara since they were kids. Marcus greeted Damien warmly, but Damien could sense the protective nature of his gaze. He knew that Marcus cared deeply for Zara, and he understood why he would be wary of Damien, given his past mistakes. "So Damien," Marcus began, his tone casual but with an underlying seriousness, "what are your intentions with Zara? I mean, we all know about the bet." Zara shot Marcus a warning look, but Damien put a reassuring hand on her arm, signaling that it was okay. He knew this was something he had to face head on. "I understand your concerns, Marcus," Damien said, his voice calm. "And I won't deny my past mistakes, but I love Zara, and I'm committed to her. I know I have a lot to make up for, but I promise you, I'm here for the long haul. I want to build a life with her, a real life, not one based on a bet." Marcus studied Damien for a moment, then nodded, his expression softening. "That's good to hear. Zara deserves someone who will treat her right. Just make sure you do." Damien nodded, his eyes meeting Marcus's. "I will. You have my word." The rest of the evening was filled with laughter and joy. As the sun began to set, Damien and Zara found themselves sitting on the steps of a nearby house, watching as the sky turned a beautiful shade of pink and orange. The air was filled with the scent of barbecues and the sound of laughter, and for Damien, it was a moment of pure contentment. "Thank you for bringing me here," Damien said, his voice soft. "This place, it feels like home." Zara smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "That's because it is. This is my home, my community, and I'm glad you're here, Damien." Damien looked at her, his heart swelling with love. "I want to be a part of this, Zara. I want to be a part of your world. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm trying to be better. For you, for us." Zara reached out, taking Damien's hand in hers. "I know you are, and I see the changes you've made. It means a lot to me, Damien." They sat there in silence for a while, watching as the stars began to twinkle in the sky. For Damien, it was a moment of clarity, a realization that his love for Zara was real, that he was willing to do whatever it took to be the man she deserved. The next day, Damien decided to take things a step further. He wanted to make a real difference, not just in Zara's life, but in the lives of the people she cared about. He began reaching out to local organizations, using his influence and resources to support the community. He organized donations, sponsored events, and even worked to get funding for the community center where Zara volunteered. It wasn't just about money. Damien knew that true change required time, effort, and dedication. He spent hours working with the community, listening to their needs, understanding their struggles, and doing everything he could to help. Zara watched his efforts, her heart swelling with pride. She could see the genuine change in Damien, the way he had transformed from an arrogant, self-absorbed millionaire into a man who cared deeply for others. He was no longer the man who had made a bet at her expense. He was someone she could love, someone she could trust. One afternoon, as they worked at the community center, Zara turned to Damien, her eyes filled with emotion. "You've changed, Damien," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I can see it, and I'm proud of you." Damien looked at her, his heart swelling with love. "Thank you, Zara. That means everything to me. I love you, and I just want to be the man you deserve." Zara smiled, her eyes softening. "You already are." The 6-month marriage agreement was coming to an end, but Damien knew that he didn't want this to be the end of their relationship. He wanted more. He wanted a real future with Zara, one that wasn't defined by a bet or a contract, but by love. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony, Damien turned to Zara, his expression serious. "Zara, I know our marriage agreement is almost up, but I don't want this to end. I want us to be together, for real. I love you, and I want to build a life with you." Zara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the genuine love he felt for her. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could have a future together. "I love you too, Damien," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "And I want that too. But it has to be real. No contracts, no bets. Just us." Damien nodded, his heart swelling with hope. "Just us," he repeated, his voice filled with emotion. In that moment, they knew that they were ready to move forward together, not as two people bound by a bet, but as partners, as equals, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the end of the 6-month marriage agreement approached, Damien and Zara found themselves navigating their relationship with a new sense of purpose. Their love had blossomed beyond the bet that had brought them together, and they both knew that this was no longer about proving a point. It was about building something real, something lasting. One afternoon, Damien decided it was time to take the next step. He had made a decision, one that he hoped would show Zara just how serious he was about their future together. He wanted to ask her to marry him again, this time without any conditions or contracts, just love. He planned a special evening, one that would reflect everything they had been through together and everything they had built. Damien knew that Zara loved the simple moments, the honest gestures that showed he was paying attention. He wanted this proposal to be a reflection of that, a quiet, intimate moment that would hold deep meaning for both of them. Damien reached out to Zara's mother, Judith, for her blessing. He knew how important Zara's family was to her, and he wanted to make sure that Judith was on board. Judith was initially hesitant, but after seeing the genuine effort Damien had made to change, she agreed, her eyes filled with hope for her daughter's future. That evening, Damien brought Zara to the community center, where they had spent so much time together over the past few months. The room was filled with candles, casting a warm glow, and the air was filled with the soft sound of music. It was simple, yet beautiful, just like their love. Zara looked around, her eyes widening in surprise. "What is all this?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity. Damien smiled, his heart pounding in his chest. He took Zara's hand and led her to the center of the room. "This is for you, Zara. For us." He took a deep breath, his eyes locking with hers. "Zara, when I first met you, I was a different person. I was selfish, arrogant, and I didn't understand what truly mattered. In life, I made a bet that I now realize was one of the worst decisions I ever made, but that bet led me to you, and you changed me in ways I never thought possible. Zara's eyes filled with tears, her heart swelling with emotion. She could see the sincerity in Damien's eyes, the love that radiated from him. You showed me what it means to love, to care for others, and to be part of something bigger than myself. Damien continued, his voice trembling. You taught me the value of empathy, of standing up for what's right, and of truly seeing people for who they are. You made me want to be a better man, and I am forever grateful for that. He got down on one knee, his eyes never leaving Zara's. Zara, I love you more than anything in this world. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, not because of a bet, not because of a contract, but because I love you with all my heart. Will you marry me? For real this time. Zara's heart swelled with love, her eyes filled with tears. She had seen Damien transform from an arrogant millionaire to a man who was willing to fight for what was right, who was willing to stand by her side through thick and thin. She knew that this was real, that Damien truly loved her, and that he was committed to building a future together. Yes, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, I will marry you. Damien's face broke into a smile, his heart soaring as he slipped the ring onto Zara's finger. He stood, pulling her into his arms, holding her close as they both let the emotions of the moment wash over them. It was a moment of pure joy, a moment that signified the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. The people they had grown close to at the community center began to emerge from the shadows, clapping and cheering for the couple. Damien had planned for this, knowing how much this community meant to Zara, and he wanted them to be a part of this special moment. Zara laughed through her tears, her heart swelling with love for Damien and for the people around her. Judith approached them, her eyes filled with tears of happiness. She pulled Zara into a tight hug, her voice filled with emotion. I'm so happy for you, my love, she whispered, her eyes glistening. Zara hugged her mother back, her heart full. She then turned to Damien, her eyes filled with love. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Damien smiled, his eyes never leaving hers. No thank you, Zara. You saved me. You showed me what it means to truly live, to truly love. The evening was filled with laughter and joy as they celebrated their engagement. There was no lavish display of wealth, no over-the-top spectacle, just friends, family, and the love they shared. For Zara, it was everything she had ever wanted, an honest, heartfelt moment that marked the beginning of a new journey with the man she loved. In the days that followed, Zara and Damien began planning their future together. They knew that their journey wouldn't be easy, that there would be challenges ahead, but they were ready to face them together. They continued their work at the community center, their commitment to making a difference in the lives of those around them stronger than ever. Zara knew that she was marrying a man who had made mistakes, but she also knew that he was committed to being better, to making amends for his past. And for Damien, Zara was the light that guided him, the reason he wanted to be a better man. One afternoon, as they worked together at the community center, Zara looked at Damien, her eyes filled with love. I think we're going to be okay, she said, her voice soft. Damien looked at her, his heart swelling with emotion. I know we will be. As long as we're together, we can face anything. Zara smiled, her heart filled with hope for their future. They had come a long way, and they still had a long journey ahead. But they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, ready to build a life filled with love, compassion, and hope. The 6-month agreement had come to an end, but for Damien and Zara, this was just the beginning. They were no longer bound by a bet or a contract. They were bound by love, by a commitment to each other that was real and unbreakable. As they stood together, hand in hand, looking out at the city they had come to call home, they knew that they were ready for whatever the future held. Together, they had found something worth fighting for, something that went beyond money, power, or ego. They had found love, and that was all they needed. As the date for their real wedding approached, everything seemed perfect for Damien and Zara. They had overcome challenges, they had grown closer, and they were finally ready to start a life together. For real this time. But as we know, life can always throw a few unexpected surprises, and what was supposed to be a simple, joyful day would turn into something entirely different. The morning of the wedding, Damien woke up with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Today was the day he would finally marry Zara. Not because of a bet, not because of ego, but because of love. He was ready for it. He had planned everything down to the smallest detail. The venue was set, the guests were invited, and Zara had even given him permission to make it a bit fancier this time. However, the first surprise of the day came when Damien received a call from Marcus. "Damien, we have a little situation here," Marcus said, his tone laced with tension. Damien frowned, instantly on edge. "What do you mean, Marcus? What's going on?" "Just come to the venue." "I don't think it's something you want to hear over the phone," Marcus said before abruptly hanging up. Damien's heart began to race. He quickly got dressed, his mind filled with worry. As he arrived at the venue, his jaw dropped in shock. The beautiful outdoor setup had been completely wrecked by an unexpected storm the night before. Chairs were overturned, decorations were scattered everywhere, and the arch they were supposed to say their vows under was barely standing. Damien's heart sank. This wasn't how the day was supposed to go. He turned to Marcus, who gave him an apologetic look. "We're trying to get things in order, but we might have to make some changes." Damien closed his eyes and took a deep breath. This was a test. He knew it. This was one of those moments where the old Damien would have lost his temper, where he would have tried to control every little detail. But he wasn't that man anymore. He opened his eyes and smiled. "Okay, Marcus, let's make the best of this. Whatever we need to do, let's do it. As long as I'm marrying Zara today, nothing else matters." Marcus nodded, a grin spreading across his face. "That's the spirit. We'll get through this." Meanwhile, Zara was getting ready at her mother's house, completely unaware of the chaos unfolding at the venue. She was laughing with her bridesmaids, enjoying the morning, when she received a text from an unknown number. It read, "You should know that Damien isn't who he says he is. Meet me at the old warehouse on Maple Street if you want the truth." Zara stared at the message, her heart pounding. What could this mean? Was this some kind of prank? She tried to ignore it, but curiosity and a hint of doubt gnawed at her. After everything they'd been through, could there still be secrets Damien was keeping from her? Against her better judgment, Zara decided to go. She asked one of her bridesmaids to cover for her and slipped out of the house, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and anger. She arrived at the old warehouse, a chill running down her spine as she stepped inside. The air was damp, the place dimly lit, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was making a huge mistake. Suddenly, she heard a voice, a familiar voice. "Zara, I didn't expect you to actually come." Zara spun around, her eyes widening in shock. It was Jack, Damien's old friend, the same friend who had made the bet that started this whole journey. "Jack? What are you doing here?" Zara asked, her voice laced with confusion. Jack smirked, stepping closer. "I thought you should know the truth about Damien, the truth about why he really married you. He didn't tell you everything, did he?" Zara frowned, her heart sinking. "I know about the bet, Jack. I know all about it. And Damien has changed. He's not the same person he was back then." Jack shook his head, his smirk widening. "You think you know everything, but there's more. Damien didn't just make a bet. He made a deal. A deal with me that if he failed, I would take over his company. He was willing to risk everything, Zara, even you." Zara's eyes widened, her heart pounding. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Damien had risked everything. He hadn't told her about this, about the full extent of the bet. A wave of anger and betrayal washed over her, and she turned to leave. "Zara, wait," Jack called out. "Don't you see? He's not the hero you think he is. He's just a man who got lucky." Zara paused, her back to Jack. She took a deep breath, her mind racing. Then slowly she turned around, her eyes filled with determination. "No, Jack, you're wrong. Damien may have made mistakes, but he's not the man you think he is. He's changed. He's fought for me, for us, and I know he loves me. You're the one who hasn't changed. You're still trying to tear him down because you can't stand the fact that he's become a better person." Jack's smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing. "You're making a mistake, Zara." "No," Zara said firmly. "The mistake would be listening to you." With that, she turned and walked out of the warehouse, her heart pounding, but her mind clear. She knew who Damien was. She knew the man he had become, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from them. Back at the venue, Damien and Marcus, along with a group of friends, had managed to pull everything together. The setup was different, simpler, but it was beautiful in its own way. Damien was standing at the altar, his heart pounding as he waited for Zara. He glanced at his watch, worry gnawing at him. She should have been here by now. Just as doubt began to creep into his mind, he saw her, Zara, walking towards him, her eyes locked on his. Relief washed over him, and a smile spread across his face. She looked beautiful, her dress flowing around her, her eyes filled with determination and love. As she reached the altar, Damien could see the emotion in her eyes. He took her hands in his voice barely a whisper. "Zara, is everything okay?" Zara looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. "I know, Damien. I know about everything. About Jack. About the deal." Damien's heart sank, his face paling. "Zara, She shook her head, cutting him off. "It doesn't matter. I know who you are now, Damien. I know the man you've become, and I love you. I'm here because I want to be, because I choose you." Damien felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, his heart swelling with love and relief. He pulled her closer, his voice filled with emotion. "I love you too, Zara, more than anything, and I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life making up for my past mistakes." The officiant began the ceremony, and as they exchanged vows, Damien couldn't help but feel overwhelmed with emotion. This was real. This was love, pure and simple. No bets, no contracts, no deals. Just two people who had fought for each other, who had chosen each other despite everything. When the officiant finally said, "You may now kiss the bride," Damien leaned in, his lips meeting Zara's in a gentle, loving kiss. The crowd erupted in applause, and Damien knew that this was the beginning of their forever. As they pulled away, Zara looked at him, her eyes filled with mischief. "By the way, Jack tried to crash our wedding," she whispered, her voice filled with humor. Damien raised an eyebrow, a grin spreading across his face. "Oh, really? What did he want?" "To tell me you're still a jerk," Zara said with a laugh. "But I told him he's wrong. You're my jerk." Damien laughed, pulling her into a tight embrace. "I'll take that, as long as I get to be yours." With the laughter of their friends and family around them, Damien and Zara walked down the aisle together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. They had fought for their love, they had faced the odds, and they had won. And as they looked towards their future, they knew that whatever surprises life had in store, they would face them together, with love, laughter, and a determination that nothing could break.